Welcome, good people of the interwebs. Now, lately I've been talking to a bunch of people about the destruction that humans are causing and how global warming is so real and oh my god, tomorrow the world will end. Well, not tomorrow. I think the current prediction is in about 10 years. But see, I've been around for a while and I've had these predictions been told to us before. The world would end in 10 years, 12 years. Oh, no more than 10 years from now, it will be too hot. Oh, no, wait. It'll be too cold. We're going into an ice age. Oh, no, wait again. It will be too hot. Well, there is a climate change and the world is getting warmer. I'm not denying that, mind you. I recognize it in the last 10 years, temperatures have gone up. But I have a problem with the whole man-made thing. Because this is something that they will never tell you. But did you realize that we're still in an ice age? We're in the last quarter of an ice age. And in the last quarter of an ice age, on average, the ice gets smaller and the temperatures get higher. This is what happens at the end of an ice age. So I'm saying, yeah, this is completely expected. But no, this is man-made. And I remember that some time ago there was this, how do you call it? This documentary called An Inconvenient Truth. Or, I don't know, a very interesting lie, I would call it. Or at least a good way to make money, because hey, he made a lot of money out of that one. But in that Inconvenient Truth, they had a bunch of questions. Okay, well, they stated some stuff. And I found there's a quiz, an Inconvenient Truth quiz online. It's funny because half of the quizzes, half of the page I'm on is in Dutch, but the quiz is in English, which is good because that's what I want to show you people. What am I going to show you? Well, obviously this. Let me go here, and there we go there, and poof, there it is. What is one of the most vulnerable parts of our planet? Now you will see that I have some other websites open in this one because I will use them in a moment. According to this, the most vulnerable part of our planet is the atmosphere. And I can somewhat understand that because that's where our oxygen is, it's the air we breathe and all that. And there's quite a lot of stuff in the atmosphere that is harmful to us. I mean, nitrogen, CO2. But it's only harmful to us in certain numbers. Now, CO2, everyone is raving about CO2. Oh, the world is coming to an end because CO2. We'll get to that in a moment. But, yeah, the atmosphere is something that is vulnerable. Then again, everything is vulnerable on the planet. Hell, even humans are vulnerable, so never mind that. This is a nice opener. Did you know, by the way, that if water would evaporate, we have nothing to drink? Anyway, continuing. I know, it's silly of me. Now, regarding Mount Kilimanjaro, what did Mr. Gore say will disappear within a decade? Mind you, the movie got made in 2005, 2006? Let's say 2009. It doesn't matter. A decade is 10 years. If it was in 2009, now should be the time that it would have been gone. Well, obviously, there would be no more snow on Mount Kilimanjaro. So, I'm not quite sure what I'm seeing on this image, but I don't think rock is that white. Could it be that this is simply not true? Could be. Could be. Fair is fair. Could be. In 650 years, what have CO2 levels never risen above? Okay, 300 parts per million. Not quite true, because at this point in time we are close to 400 parts per million in certain areas at certain times in a year. Because let's be honest, if you're in an autumn time measuring close to a forest, yeah, you're going to score higher than if you're going to score that same air in a desert. Above water, by the way, the water does take in CO2, but, well, forests and plants give away a lot of CO2. Most of the CO2 in the world is being created by nature itself. Humans only create about 3% of it. But let's see, do high levels of CO2 indeed have never been so high in the past? Well, if we're going to look at the 650-year margin that they brought in, then yeah, he's correct. But I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Hoppa! In the past, CO2 was higher, but we have to go very far into the past. We're talking, for example, in the Ordovician, Silurian, and in the Jurassic Cretaceous periods. They were respectively, anyway, they were between the 4,000 and 2,000 parts per million, which is quite a bit larger than the 300 to 400 parts per million we are on now. Now, there's more information here. Links will be provided downstairs. But yeah, so I mean, he's correct. In the last 650 years, CO2 has never been higher. But if we go a little bit further back in time, yeah, they have been a lot higher actually. Okay, in which period have been the 10 hottest year of the atmospheric temperature been recorded? My English is badly sentenced. Now, here they're going to say from 1990 to 2005. I'm going to even go further than that and say, you know what? You're completely correct, because since then the 10 hottest years are in the 2000s alone. But as I said, we're on the end of an ice age. It would be very weird not to think of the world warming up. Why is that? Because we're at the end of an ice age. I mean, the ice doesn't melt because it's time. The ice melts because it gets warmer. This is cyclical. This has happened umpteen times before. I love how everyone therefore claims it's because of us humans. But, I mean, there were ice ages before there were humans, and those ice ages ended as well. So there might be something else at play. Personally, my money is on that big yellow thing that we so often see in the sky. Obviously, I don't know, it could be that that's just a lamp, but I'm thinking that big yellow thing is creating a lot more heat than we realize. And our orbit around the sun, which isn't really around it, but our orbit with the sun isn't really circular either. It's more elliptical. So at certain points in time we're a bit closer and we're a bit further away, and I think that will have a lot more effect. I'm not the only one saying that, by the way. There have been studies into it, and they are at this point in time they have predicted that in the coming 5 years, I think it's the coming 5 years, temperatures around the tundras in Russia will be colder again. We will see if that's true. It could be. I haven't done the calculations. I wouldn't even know how. I'll try to find that link. That's an interesting one, by the way. But anyway, if not, I'm sorry. But yeah, there are people who are thinking that the world will start cooling down a bit again. Which is funny, because we're still in the end of an ice age. I thought ice ages always ended. But then again, that could be wrong too. Okay, so hottest years, yeah, no, I'm going to give them that. Definitely true that the hottest years are, well, in the last 20 years. What is the relation to global warming and precipitation? Global warming causes more precipitation, but in this form of storms. Relocation of precipitation means drought in some places and floods in others. I think this is the one. No? Yeah, this is the one. This one talks about how indeed global warming can cause more storms, but at the same time they haven't really seen an increase in the amount of storms and their ferocity. So yeah, there is some truth that more heat in the air creates more water vapor in the air, therefore the air will have more energy, and theoretically speaking it is therefore very likely to say the storms therefore will be harder, but we don't really see that. There have been a lot of powerful storms, but there have always been powerful storms. So that's not really proven. Then again, it's also not really debunked, which is funny considering, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt. You know what? Yes, more heat creates more warm water vapor, which creates more strong storms. Okay, this is true, if it is true. But what is causing the heat? Global warming causes more precipitation. There you go. But did you hear about what happened to Lake Chad in Africa? Dried up to almost nothing. It was one of the largest lakes in the world. And let's go to Lake Chad. Now, it is true that Lake Chad has shrunk a lot, especially from 1963 to 1998. But in 2007, according to this Wikipedia article, the image shows a significant improvement over the previous years. And they've been talking about what they can do to make it bigger. But I'm not quite sure if they're going to do that. So, yeah, it did get a lot smaller, but it's growing again. So it's not as black and white as they would like you to think it is. What's the cause that it's smaller and now growing again? That's a very good question. I'm sorry if you also thought you would be getting an answer to that question. But the question is a very good one. Keep that in mind. Maybe someone else will be able to answer you that. Because the thing with global warming is, yeah, the planet gets warmer. Does that mean the water disappears? No, because the Earth is almost a closed environment. I'm saying almost because a lot of the heat that this Earth is under comes from outside. But water, and therefore water vapor, will stay within the atmosphere of the Earth. So we won't lose that. Heat is added and lost, because at one point heat comes in, but on the other point we evaporate heat in the night. But water and such does not leave the Earth. So if it goes from one place, it's sure to go somewhere else. The question is where. Now that's a good question. A question the inconvenient truth, by the way, did not answer. What has happened what has happened to the tundra in Alaska in the last 35 years? Well, this is an interesting one. It has begun melting. Yeah, where is it? I'm pretty sure I had it. No, I didn't have it. I thought I put it up here somewhere. Nope, it's not this one. I'm sorry. I thought I had it put up. You know, the thing is, they're correct. The tundras aren't melting as such, but they are getting warmer. So the ice is less strong. This is factually true. Again, the world is getting warmer. If the world is getting warmer, and we are at the end of an ice age, would that then automatically not mean that places that are frozen are now more likely to melt. I am saying more likely though, because it's not 100% true. But in case of the tundras, yes, they are getting warmer. Why does the melting of the Arctic ice cap increase global warming? Instead of the sun's rays bouncing off the ice sheet, they heat up the ocean, and as the ice melts, this keeps a lot of the heat on Earth. This keeps a lot heat on Earth. See, I thought I saw it wrong, but they basically made a very funny sentence. This time it wasn't my fault that I didn't read it right. It is true though. We do know that some of the heat rays that hit, not the heat rays, sun rays that hit the ice are reflected and bounce back up into the atmosphere. Not all of them. And if the ice melts, there is less of it to reflect off. But at the same time, what we also know is that water vapor, so the water that evaporates in the air, catches a lot of heat from the sun rays as well. So even if the ice would have been big, the increasing water vapor from the Middle East and, well, the Mediterranean areas will also capture heat and therefore bring more heat to the ice. At the same time though, the ice, yes, it is smelting, it is not smelting, not nearly smelting as fast as it was predicted. And we've already seen that in certain areas, the ice is actually growing again, which to me sounds weird considering we're at the end of an ice age. Yes, I've mentioned this before, and I thought that meant ice had to go altogether. Not that I'm complaining, mind you, merely stating. But yeah, no, it's true that water is evaporating more because the water is getting hotter because there's less ice. It's interesting. What is happening to the polar bears as a result of the ice melting? They're dying because they struggle to find ice to live on. Well, in all fairness, this one I have debunked earlier in one of my videos. This is utter crap. I mean, yes, it's nearly as much crap as Mount Kilimanjaro not having snow anymore. But the polar bear population has grown. Now, I'm not going to say they're a big, huge, happy family because that's rubbish. But the polar bear population has grown. The black spots are the biggest groups. The white spots, unfortunately, we don't have real information on. But then again, the Arctic Basin is pretty big, so I can understand that people don't really move around that much and easily there. This is kind of interesting that in the Chukchi Sea, they do have these answers, but in the Laptev Sea and the Kara Sea, not so much. But maybe because Russia doesn't care as much. And in all fairness, on the edges of Greenland, people don't seem to care that much either. But if we look in the Canadian areas, these are stable provinces. The blues are stable. They have seen a growth, but they are stable now. The green ones are still growing. This is the only one, this is the southern Beaufort Sea area. This is the only place that we can actually see a decline. And we don't know why. We know it's there. But if we look at the Chukchi Sea area, we don't know if it's climbing or increasing, but we do know that there's a large population there, which is far larger than the Beaufort area. So maybe there's more to it. Maybe overfishing. I don't know. Maybe more people have started to live in this area. I don't know. What I do know is that the polar bear is an apex predator, and they're not even fearful of humans, but they do stay away from us on average, or at least this is what I've been told. I've only seen polar bears in zoos, let's be honest. But the fact of the matter is there is a growth in polar bears, not a shrinkage in polar bears. Shrinkage, sounds funny to call it like that. What impact will the melting of the Greenland ice have on ocean currents, and why is it important? Now this one is very interesting, because it could cause another ice age, because it would stop the transfer of water that goes into the ocean's currents. Here you see it. They even recognize it. We don't really know what causes the changes to our environment. Every small thing, a butterfly's wing flap, and chaos theory, blah blah. Okay, that's a bit of bullshit, but we don't really know what could cause it. So, if the glaciers on Greenland melt too much, then the water would cool in a different way, the water patterns would change. This would be, by the way, devastational for the fish in the sea, but they'll manage because that's how nature works. And it could harbor the next ice age, which is funny considering we have not yet left this ice age. But then again, this is not something we need to worry about, because the glaciers on Greenland have actually grown. They've become bigger again, which kind of seems weird to me as well. But there is that. So here are the first 10 questions. I'm not doing the rest. Maybe I'm going to do the rest on another time. But here are the first 10 questions of the inconvenient truth. And in these first 10 questions, yeah, we can see that the world's getting warmer. This is true. But a lot of other things that they're actually scaring us with are not true. This is kind of the whole shtick when it comes to the, how do you call them? Climate change mafia. And I like it. I do like it. The fact that they care about our planet. I'm so happy that they care about our planet. But not enough to actually do something. Well, that's unfair to say. You could stop driving your car. Yes, I could. But that won't do much. I mean, let's be honest. All of the CO2 we create, all the CO2 that humans put into the atmosphere, is about 3% of the atmospheric CO2. 97% of the CO2 in the atmosphere comes from nature itself. It's not the CO2 that's the problem. Now, the heating of the world could become a problem. Yeah, I'm not going to say it's not. Question is, can we change something about that? I know for a fact that as long as we keep talking about how CO2 is the problem, we can't. Because CO2 simply isn't the problem. I mean, we've had periods of time, okay, it's millions of years ago, but we have periods of time when we had way higher levels of CO2 in the atmosphere, and we had an ice age. So CO2 and warming, not really that connected. Can we change something about what causes the warming of the Earth? Well, if it's indeed the sun and the orbit of the world around it, my answer is going to be no. What we can, however, do is try to survive. And there are plenty of things we can do to survive. I mean, if we look at CO2 as a problem in the Netherlands, for example, I'm going to remove this, by the way. If we look at CO2 in the Netherlands, we're already using CO2 from petrochemical industry and whatnot to help grow plants in greenhouses. Why? Because plants eat CO2. It's what they live on. Then again, when they die and the leaves fall on the ground, they release that CO2. When you burn wood, they also release that CO2. CO2 on this planet isn't new. We're not creating new CO2. It's always been here. It's in the very environment we live. The CO2 is constant, just like the water is constant. The Earth is like a greenhouse. The only thing that is added to our greenhouse is the energy from the sun. And whenever a meteor strikes, I guess, But that's about it. So we're not creating new CO2. It's not that by shooting guns or driving cars we are creating new CO2. I mean, the CO2 in gasoline, well, that CO2 was on this planet for the longest time. We're merely releasing that CO2 back into the environment, and then plants will pick it up again, and it comes back into that thing called circle of life. Because what a lot of people seem to forget, the circle of life thing is not just animals eating other animals, or animal eating plant, or plants eating dead animals, because it's all of it. CO2 is part of it, as is oxygen, by the way. I mean, CO2 is creating oxygen, or rather trees are creating oxygen with CO2, and then we're kind enough as to create CO2 by breathing oxygen. Look at how nice we are. We're helping the plants. Plants actually grow because more CO2. This is funny because we see that the Sahara is creating more steppe areas around it where plants are growing. Even though there's not more water, it's not raining there more. There might be more rain in the future though, because the plants will evaporate moist and therefore clouds might form. And okay, this is all over the place. I've been talking for quite a while. I'm really curious what you think. Have I said anything that you think is factually incorrect, and why? Maybe I can answer you on that one. Maybe you're correct. And what do you think? Should we indeed believe in this climate change narrative? And is climate change man-made? And I think that's the important part, because if it isn't man-made, should we do something? And if it is man-made, should we do something? And in both cases, what do you think we should do? Anyway, let me know. I am curious what you think, and I hope to see you all next time. Oh, criticism as always. Yeah, more than welcome. Nearly forgot that. Bye-bye.